I'm Gary Anthony Ramsey with your Hour News Now Rewind. Stories making headlines for the week ending March 12th, 2011. Our top stories include: American Muslims were center stage at a congressional hearing about domestic radical Islam. In Wisconsin, lawmakers vote to eliminate union powers for state workers, while other states now debate similar legislation. Libyan forces loyal to Qaddafi push back against rebels and reacquire key assets, while the West negotiates with the opposition. Kenya rejects international war crimes summonses that are targeting 6 of their current and former officials. A new diabetes drug claims to reduce the number of shots needed during the course of a week, and a founding father of black filmmaking passes away. Our top story: there were no apologies from a U.S. lawmaker who is spearheading a congressional hearing on the radicalization of Islam in America. New York Representative Peter King says the recruiting of Americans is a new phase of Al-Qaeda's plan to continue 9/11-style attacks on U.S. soil. The hearing in Washington heard from a range of people who testified, including the first Muslim voted into Congress. They also heard from relatives of young men who have been arrested for acts of terror.
Our children are in danger. This country must stand up and do something about the problem.
Support and criticism for the hearings, which are expected to last for more than a year, is split along party lines. Republicans call it a necessary process in protecting America. Democrats call the hearing little more than theater for its stigmatization of one religion. Unions all across the country are bracing for what could be a national debate and fight over the rights of state employees versus anemic state budgets, as Wisconsin votes to eliminate collective bargaining rights for its state employees. The vote had been anticipated and protested against for 3 weeks, even with minority Democrats in Wisconsin's Senate leaving the state to prevent the vote from taking place. Republican Governor Scott Walker pushed for the measure that he says will save his state millions as it seeks to cut spending. Ironically, Wisconsin was the first state to grant unions collective bargaining rights in 1959. Now, several other states are considering similar measures as state deficits force more and more reductions. In what seems like a move that will prevent Barack Obama from fulfilling a campaign promise, the president orders the resumption of trials from the controversial holding facility known as Guantanamo Bay. The president had put a ban of such trials in place when he took office in 2008, with a plan towards closing the base down. But heated debates over where and how terrorist suspects would be tried stalled the process. He still vows to try suspects in federal courts where they will have more rights. In Connecticut, a man who police say is the East Coast rapist tries to kill himself in his cell. Aaron Thomas is accused of attacking 17 women across several states during a 12-year time period. For more than a decade, sketches were the biggest clues, but investigators say DNA pulled from a cigarette butt ties the suspect to the crimes that had stymied police in Connecticut, Virginia, Maryland, and Rhode Island. Thomas, who authorities say tried to hang himself in his cell, is being held on $1.5 million bail. He faces multiple life sentences if he's convicted.
Relations between a black community in Fort Worth, Texas and its police force are strained after cops there shoot an unarmed man in front of his 3 children last week. The Fort Worth police chief met with pastors and community residents in an effort to calm nerves. Those nerves were shattered after 32-year-old Sherrall Thomas was shot by Officer Jay Romer during a traffic stop. 3 of Thomas's children were in the back seat. Police say Thomas was driving away from the scene, dragging the officer when he opened fire.
In your Hour News Now World Wrap, forces loyal to Muammar Qaddafi reacquire several key strategic positions in a civil war that could decide the fate of that country. Government troops were able to retake an important oil port and are now targeting the city of Benghazi. Rebel leaders are now asking the West for assistance in this fight, as it seems the momentum may have changed back in favor of Qaddafi. His son Saif has promised, quote, rivers of blood to defeat the rebels. Meanwhile, European diplomats have begun negotiations with opposition leaders, and more than $32 billion of Qaddafi assets have been frozen worldwide. In the Ivory Coast, the government of Laurent Gbagbo has nationalized the lucrative coca industry. It's seen as part of an effort to keep funding for his regime, which has now been ruled illegitimate by the United Nations. Gbagbo and Alassane Ouattara, the man who the UN says won the election there in the fall, have both been invited by the African Union to attend talks. It's hoped that mediation would break a stalemate that has put the country on a path towards civil war. The Ivory Coast is one of the world's largest suppliers of coca. In Kenya, that government is challenging the right of the World Court to try 6 Kenyans who are accused of leading post-election violence there in 2008. The 6 who are accused of murder and other crimes include a current deputy minister, an ex-minister, and an ex-police chief.
To indict our client for crimes committed against humanity or any of the charges that as framed by the prosecutor. However, it's a legal process that we require to go through, and as people who have been summoned, we have agreed that we will.
More than 1,200 people died in the wake of that election 4 years ago. That's your World Wrap. In health news, if you or someone you know has diabetes, then you're well familiar with the daily and sometimes arduous task of insulin injections. Well, a new drug may mean less pain and inconvenience. In phase 2 of the testing of the drug degludec, patients who injected with the drug 3 times a week got the same results as those who endured daily injections. Many patients who suffer from type 2 diabetes also suffer from the complications of sometimes erratic or non-consistent treatment. More than 4 million African Americans have diabetes, and more than a quarter of black women over the age of 55 have type 2 diabetes. The result of the study is published in Lancet magazine. In entertainment news, 50 Cent, Beyonce, and several other performers are caught in the drama of Libya after it's revealed that they took money for special performances for the Qaddafi family. In the case of Mariah Carey, it was $1 million to perform 4 songs for one New Year's Eve party held by Saif Qaddafi. The Qaddafi New Year's parties were said to be known for being over the top in scope and decadence. Well, since the story broke on NBC News, all performers involved have said they will now donate those proceeds to charity. And finally, black filmmakers are mourning the passing of a man who wasn't a big name in Hollywood, but who certainly worked to pave the way for black directors. Alan Willis died at his home in San Francisco. Willis learned his craft photography from famed shooter Ansel Adams, and then later worked with blaxploitation legend Melvin Van Peebles. Instead of blockbusters, he chose to focus on social issues by making documentaries about the AIDS crisis, the Civil Rights Movement, and the Black Panther Party. Alan Willis was 94. For a complete check of any of the stories you've seen on The Rewind, remember, as always, go to the bottom of the webpage, find the link of the story you'd like to see, and click your way through. That's your Our News Now Rewind for this week. I'm Gary Anthony Ramsey.